I just got back from Sicily Monday, and you see very few masks.
I started running here and I'm just let it go. I go in Target or something like that. Who's in there and do there.
Well, I wore mine on the plane for about half an hour, and I thought I could, well, 15-hour flight. So that's not what happened.
Give it up.
So
It's hard. I wear mine in orchestra rehearsals and I do a lot of breathing and something playing cello. That's hard. I feel like I'm smothering.
Click the lights. We're at 4:05, everyone.
Didn't want to be too late. Well, hello, everyone. Any of you don't know me, I'm Nancy McKinney, one of the officers of our AAUP chapter here at Eastern. Thank you all for attending this forum, and special thank you to those of the who are joining us via Zoom. We appreciate that. It's my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Michael Eaves, the chair of EKU's Board of Regents. Mr. Eaves was appointed to Eastern's Board of Regents by Governor Andy Beshear in April 2021 to fill out an unexpired term. Mr. Eaves was voted by fellow regents to begin serving as their chair on July 1st of this year. So he's very new to that job. In the fall of 2021, he told me he retired from the Richmond law firm of Eaves, Olds, Bohannon, and Floyd. He had been a member of the Kentucky State Bar Association since 1979. He earned a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from EKU and his Juris Doctorate from the University of Kentucky. His wife, Ava, is also an EKU graduate. She retired from Baptist Health Richmond, where she was a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator. In addition to practicing law, Mr. Eaves has been involved in the formation and operation of a local bank and has worked in residential and commercial real estate development in Madison County. He is active in volunteer and charitable organizations, including being founder and primary sponsor of the Pro-Am Golf Classic, which was started to benefit the Patty A. Clay Hospital Foundation. And I remember when it was Patty A. Clay, and it's now Baptist Health, of course. Before we go into our question and answer session, which will be moderated by my colleague, Dr. Jerry Noctway, I want to make a presentation to Mr. Eaves from our AAUP chapter. This is a copy of the AAUP's policy documents and reports, the 2015 edition, which is our centennial edition. The AAUP was founded in 1915 by a group of faculty who got together because they were very concerned that a number of faculty had been arbitrarily fired just because they were espousing unpopular ideas at that time. Ever since its founding, AAUP has strongly advocated for academic freedom and tenure as the essential underpinning of academic freedom, and also for something we call shared governance, which refers to the idea that the government of a college or university should be divided up among the regents, the administration, and the faculty according to what is being decided. And with faculty, it's their subject expertise, curriculum, instruction, deciding who among their colleagues gets promoted, that sort of thing. So we call this affectionately the Red Book for obvious reasons. It's not to be read from cover to cover unless you want to sleep quickly.
And I hope there won't be a test.
I have marked a couple of things in here that I consider our foundational principles. One is the 1940 Statement on Tenure and Academic Freedom. That's number one there. And then there's a statement on government of colleges and universities, which is where we get the concept of shared governance. They never actually use that term in here. They call it joint effort. That was back in the 60s. That's what they called it. So anyway, most schools, colleges and universities do base their faculty handbooks and policies upon AUP principles, which have been developed by our national organization, and they're carefully vetted by all kinds of people and approved by other organizations, not just AUP in many cases. So Eastern is among those that does base some of its faculty policies and handbook rules on AUP principles. So we thought it would be appropriate to give you your own copy of it.
Thank you.
You can clap for everyone, yeah.
Thank you very much for coming to.
Signed by the author.
Yeah. So I forgot to say, if you haven't signed in already, please do so, and there are light refreshments back there. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Dr. Knox.
Well, did you have any opening comments you'd like to?
No, you've set me up front on an elevated stool. It looks like I've got a program to give, and I really don't. I'll say simply that I've been on the Board of Regents just around 18 months, and I've been honored to be asked to attend. I attended the Faculty Senate meeting. I attended the Staff Council meeting, and I'm trying to move my way around the university to meet with various groups who invite me, primarily to learn. And that's, as I told when I was asked to attend tonight's meeting, I try not to have an opinion before I have facts. That's the lawyer in me. So in meeting with these various groups and in meeting with administration and folks like Jason with the faculty, I'm trying to learn what the issues are, what's important to staff and faculty and other groups on campus. And so it's for me, this is just one of a number of things that I do on a weekly basis to try to understand the things that you all deal with every day. You take for granted you know all about it. No reason I should know anything about it. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Well, while people, sometimes it can take time for the crickets to disperse while people are formulating questions. So let's start out with a softball one. So
Good,
you've been on the board.
Keep those coming.
You've been on the board for 18 months. I suspect your association with Richmond and possibly the university has been longer than that. So just talk a little bit about that. What's been your association or a knowledge of EKU before even being on board?
Well, of course, I graduated from law school in 1979 and came back to Richmond and have been practicing law here since 1979. Our office is on Main Street. During that period of time, I've had significant interaction with EKU, represented a number of faculty here, sued Eastern over a couple of tenure questions umpteen years ago. Had the distinction of being, I deposed Dr. Martin, which was an experience for a young lawyer. And I had been, of course, been involved in the community pretty significantly since then. The hospital was one of my earliest clients. I represented them for a very long time, but was involved with and knew a number of the past chairs of the Board of Regents, J.T. Gilbert, Gary Abney, Craig Turner, knew all those folks, certainly knew Gary and J.T. very well. And but involved as just any other member of the community would be with what I thought always considered to be the biggest player in town, which was the university. So, but since, in addition to practicing law, we've developed a real estate. We bought a significant amount of property downtown. All of First Street we bought off. You're looking at the guy who tore down all the bars on First Street. and there were some memories for me. I told the faculty senate, show you how long it's been since I was here. I lived on, when I was a freshman, I lived on the 19th floor of Commonwealth Hall, which at the time was brand new. And of course, now it's not even a dorm. So it's, but it's, Eastern has certainly changed since I was here. But it's a huge asset to the community. One of my personal emphasis is to try to develop or establish, reignite a relationship between the city and EKU, which I feel kind of inexplicable to me that there isn't a relationship there. Frankly, hasn't been in my memory. And I think neither Eastern nor the city will ever be all they can be until they learn to work together. So that's one of my personal goals. But right now, I'm just learning what the challenges are. We had a conversation earlier today about future opportunities and future challenges for the university, and we're sort of thinking through that process and trying to identify and understand what those are. That's what I've been spending my time doing.
Excellent. All right, I think we're going to now open up questions to everyone. Folks on Zoom, we're going to practice, raise your hand if you have a question, and folks on Zoom, you can raise your hand virtually, of course, and if you're not sure how to do that, you can just type stack into the chat, and that'll let me know that you have a question ready. So, not all at once.
Go ahead. Well, I'll try to start.
Oh, and if you can just give us your name and department.
Okay, I'm Kristen Keene. I'm on the faculty of the music department. And, coming out of the pandemic, it was very challenging. We've been under budget crisis, under budget crisis, under budget crisis. And, of course, in our department, our numbers are very important. We have to fill our ensembles, we have to recruit. It was very hard to do that during the pandemic. So we've been very, very worried, very concerned about staying relevant, being able to do our jobs. And we've run into many obstacles in terms of leadership in our department. And it's one of our frustrations is that we feel like we've really lost our voice, that it's very, very difficult to communicate with the chain of command. For a while, we didn't have a chair, and then our department was combined with some other departments and put together. We didn't have a voice or a say in that. It seemed like it was there to help protect us because, the funding for each department sort of went, that was started with the state funding is sort of like, it goes towards whatever degree programs put out the most graduates, and like, what do those graduates do
This is
afterwards?
the performance-based funding.
Yeah, performance-based funding, and of course, being in a liberal art field, it's a very squishy field. It's not a hard numbers field, and
It's a very
squishy.
squishy. I thought that's what you said.
Very technical term.
Yeah.
Nice squishy term. And it's been very challenging. We don't have a voice, and we feel like that we're actually very important. And we've tried to maintain our jobs and our effectiveness as much as possible. Our biggest relationship with the Board of Regents was when we were asked by our chair years ago, budget is terrible, something is going to get cut. You need to cut something. You need to get rid of something. If we don't want to get rid of people, what is it? We have to. We said, okay, if it's going to be that bad, this is when programs were getting cut all over the place. We lost French, we lost some other things. We said, okay, well, we don't like it, but we'll sacrifice the marching band because they needed new uniforms, and it's going to cost much more than we had. And then the Board of Regents came and said, no, and we did a wonderful job of like floating the marching band until such time that they could get back proper uniforms, right? And I think now looking back on it, I think that was a good call. I think we do really do need our marching band. It is like one of the most forefront units in our department. It's right there in the front. It's sort of collaborating with the athletics. But you know, the music department, like so many buildings on campus, is struggling to keep instruments from molding. We had to lose our library that was in our basement because of mold. We were just losing autonomy everywhere. Foster camp seems to be under attack. And it's an institution that, I don't know if you're aware of Foster Music Camp, it is the second longest running music camp in the country after Interlochen. And I feel like we're kind of, the tone that we got from above us was to say, you better be recruiting for foster camp because, you know, it's sort of like you've been allowed, usually we have to turn students away from foster camp, you know, and rebuilding after a pandemic, of course, is going to be really, really hard. I just feel like we don't have a voice and we don't have support. And I feel like that's probably the same for anybody that's in the liberal arts area, if I can generalize that. You know, we constantly have to justify our existence with hard numbers and hard facts, when really we are not only, we're mentoring our students, we recruit them, we go out to the high schools, we bring them in, we have to do all sorts of interference for like mental health things, and we're very close with our students, and they see that we're struggling a bit, and it doesn't help them either. And we just need more support to do what we do best, which is teach. So that's not really a question.
Well, and you know, I hear what you're saying, and a lot of the things, I remember the issue about the marching band.
Okay.
And you know, part of that, and again, underlying part of what you're saying is that we all need more money.
Or
That makes a lot of the problems go away.
support and lack of money, then sort of generosity and spirit, like we support you to do what you do best. Like we trust you to be the experts. And sometimes I don't feel like we get that trust. I'm not saying that's from the Board of Regents at all, but it's a sort of a relationship between higher administration and faculty in the department. It's like the trust that we are interested in teaching. And that's what we do best. That's what we want to do. But sometimes we feel like things are thrown in our path that prevent us from doing that.
That are not economic, you think?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a new chair and we've been sort of labeled a problem department. And which is ironic.
Because?
Or problem children. Well, because we've made some complaints. We've sort of like spoken up. And
Okay.
You know, and we've been in the process of doing our job. Some people have been reprimanded in a way that they didn't feel like there was proper due course in responding to it. It seemed like the punishment came down very harsh, very suddenly, you know, and it was in the time when we didn't have a chair. So that's part of the issue. It was part of my motivation for joining this union, this group.
Okay.
I'm going to chime in, Chris. I think what I'm hearing you're saying is that one of the things that happens is you get a sort of feedback loop where you don't have enough resources, but then on top of that, we're still going to evaluate you and kind of judge programs based on older standards, if you see what I'm saying, not recognizing the lack of resources. So the sort of deficiencies in the work that you're doing fall on you as opposed to on the lack of available resources, which I think is obvious to anybody. You know, I think that's kind of what I hear, part of what is coming out. That and the voice. I mean, actually having a sort of real
Right.
meaningful say
Right.
in decision-making in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah, as we see these decisions happening, but we're sort of like, well, why? And then it doesn't quite make sense to us, but to speak up about it, it's sort of like, sort
Right.
of bat it out of the way. I know that I'm speaking very general, but.
Thank you. Any other comments are fine too, because you're here to.
Well,
find out
I'd rather
information.
the comments, because I'm, my purpose here is not to commit
Sure.
to some line of policy
Right.
that's,
Okay.
and I can tell you what I think, but what I think is not at the end of the day, is not the objective.
Right, right. But if you were to use this forum as a sort of like a temperature reading, I would say that I've never seen my department as unified in their displeasure as they currently see them. Everyone's very upset at the way things seem to be going, unfortunately.
We have folks from lots of other departments here. Would anybody else like to speak to that issue of morale or process? Yeah.
I'm in the history department, or history, philosophy, and religious studies. I teach history. And we are not a troublesome department. What did you call it?
Problems.
We are not problem children in the department. And our department is, as a department, we're fine. But morale is still rough. And part of this is budgetary. A lot of it is budgetary. And part of that issue is that it's hard to trust budgetary statements when the administration is able to find the money for just about anything it wants, while faculty is starved, students are starved, departments are starved. So we can always come up with marching band because it has to do with football. We can always come up with a jumbotron for the football stadium. We can fund all of those kinds of things. But faculty are very underpaid. Student services are starved. Routine maintenance of buildings has been deferred for a long, long time. So yeah, the question, for many of us, the question is about budgetary priorities. Where do we actually want to spend our money? Do we want to spend our money on the academic, scholarly quality of the university, or do we want to spend it on things that maybe more serve other kinds of interests? But of course, faculty would like to see our budget spent, the emphasis placed on academics. And I'm not sure that it is. And I don't think that's a matter of not having enough money. I think that's a matter of administrative priority. So.
Understood.
Anybody else? Nancy?
Chime in with something that's been kind of weighing on me. I'm somebody that cares very much about Eastern. I have a degree from Eastern. My dad taught here for 20 years in education college. And we even set up a scholarship in the music department that's to encourage students that play stringed instruments to be in the orchestra, because my parents and I played in the orchestra here. So I come from a position of caring very much about Eastern, but it's troubled me for a long time how low paid so many good people are. I've talked to a staff member that I've known for a long time. I talked to him recently and just was asking him how things were going. And he said, well, the truth is at my rate of pay, I would have to have a spouse with an income or a roommate to share expenses to be in anything other than just spread very thin. I mean, it's very hard to make it to the end of the month. And this is somebody that's been here for many, many years, working faithfully, a person with a college degree who works in kind of a knowledge-related department. And so that troubled me. And then last month, I had a conversation with a faculty member that I didn't know, and I was getting acquainted and finding out more about him. And he was a senior lecturer. And I said, well, what does that mean exactly? And he said, not a darn thing. They put senior in front of my title, but I did not get a raise. I have zero job security. Every year at March or April, I get really tense and depressed because I'm waiting to see if I get a contract for the coming year. And he said, if I don't get it, I'm really in deep trouble because that's too late in the year to find another academic position. And what really got me was when he said, oh, and my pay is not sufficient for me to meet all my expenses, so I moonlight by working part-time at a retail establishment. And I know that's true because I've seen him there. And so I'm just really troubled by this sort of thing. And it's I think it's a long-term cultural thing with EKU, because my father, back in the 70s, when he was a department chair, he would tell me, he was very friendly and he got well acquainted with the custodians in his building. And he said, you know, Nancy, a lot of these people, they work all day at Eastern and they go home and run a farm. They work at Eastern to get, I guess, health insurance and a little bit of money, but then they have to have a second career to make it. And I'm deeply troubled by that. I think we can do better than that. And I've been hearing from faculty colleagues who know how to analyze the finances of a university, and that's something AAUP actually teaches people. And I've tried to learn it, but I'm not too good at that sort of thing. But you can analyze the finances, and they tell me that actually Eastern is in really good financial shape. I don't know if that's how you perceive it from being on the board, but I'm wondering if we are in good shape, then can't we do better with, you know, some of the least among us who are really not making it. They're loyal to Eastern. They worked for the university for many years, but they can't make a living.
Well, and answer your question first, is Eastern in really good financial shape? I'll say that I think limited resources have been fairly well managed. You know, is there a sock drawer full of cash? No. And as for, and I'll share with you something I've shared with Jason, that I am aware, and one of the issues that I've identified to look at in the next couple of years is compensation for staff and faculty. You know, the issue is, you know, how do we stay competitive? How do we keep talented people and not lose them to, you know, to say that we'll ever be able to compete with UK is probably naive, but we need, once we get good people, we need to compensate them in such a way that we're competitive enough to keep them. And that certainly is an issue. It's, you know, my first meeting, I think, was in June of last year when I think the budget was adopted. That was the first budget I'd seen. Of course, we'll be doing the budget approval again in June. But that, I'm aware of that issue. I do think it's a legitimate concern. And it's, I think it's shared by the administration. And I know it's felt by a lot of the faculty and staff. I think it's that's a reasonable concern, and something I think we need to keep our eye on and understand. Part of what I'm trying to do is understand more of the issue as to, you know, how I don't really know anything about compensation other than a big number. And I don't know that I would ever be competent to dissect that number and try to break it down. But, you know, I do understand that in some instances, maybe in a lot of instances, we're just not competitive. And we need to figure out how to fix that.
Would some numbers help? I could give you
Probably, I'm a lawyer. Hell, there's a reason I didn't become an accountant. You know, to me, you know, I'd be happy to look at whatever you send me, whatever you give me. But I do think it's an issue of understanding what the, you know, I have to understand the market, and I don't have any understanding of that at all. you know, there was a, 2% raise, I think, in this last budget. And was just too long overdue. And it's, but I guess all I could say without being any more specific is, I think, I certainly am aware, I think, representatives of the faculty and staff are aware, and I think administration is aware that that's an issue. And, you know, you get into all these other questions about, and there are a lot of them. I mean, the band, athletics, you know, could we eliminate athletics and just throw it all into the pot? I guess you could, if you assume that athletics brings nothing to the table. Does it bring any, does it bring value to the university? And I guess without anything to back it up, I think it does. You know, how do you quantify that? I don't know, but I'm sure there are people out there who do know. But those are all the simple solution is, well, let's just don't pay anything other than to educators and staff. And I don't think that's the answer either. I think it's trying to manage what you have.
And I'll just add a little bit of perspective from my point of view. I mean, I would never argue for eliminating athletics, but it is one where they often, in terms of the lines along the lines of what Rob is talking about with priorities, it has increased pretty steadily over the past years that I've been here, even as spending in other units has decreased. So a little bit fuzzy, but I believe in the operating budget from last year, spending on athletics is up about $3.5 million. And so at least I wouldn't argue that it should be eliminated, but maybe not have those sort of steady yearly increases. That in terms of what you do with that extra money, where you prioritize it and place it, I think that's more the lines of what Rob's talking about.
Well, again, and that's that's a compelling argument, and those are all things that I've thought about and again, thought about the issue and the question about how do you quantify and increase your athletic budget and then your enrollment increases. They related? I don't know.
I don't think they are.
I know, and I've already told you, I won't tell you what I think. But there's an answer out there somewhere.
Okay.
And I don't know what it is, but somebody does. And that goes back to how do you take some of those intangible things and determine whether or not they bring back to whatever. But again, that's part of the discussion. That's part of what you look at.
I think, go ahead first and then Dr. Marion.
You're the judge, so you're just listening to us all kind of articulate our closing arguments, right? I think the case can be made that in the last 6 or 7 years, the legislature has increasingly aggregated the financial responsibility of higher education. And then on top of that, COVID happened. And the environment got very dark and scary. That's like phase 1. Phase 2, the central administration in combination with the Board of Regents responded to this very frightening once-in-a-century perfect storm by centralizing activities. That is to say, activities that used to be discussed and mulled over were at lower levels and arguments, because universities are about conversation. That didn't happen. Decisions moved up to the top, and the middle and the bottom were left out of the conversation. That's step 2, centralization. Step 3, I teach management. Any management theorist will tell you that the response to centralization is alienation on the part of the workforce. And that's where we are. We have alienated faculty and staff. So that's what's happened. The restructuring, I guess my final point, process matters in universities. We're all about the process. Shared governance is all about process. Due process is all about process. You know, there's the judgment, but then there's the process by which we get to the verdict. And it's all about the process by which we get to the verdict. And that's the way it is in universities. We had to reduce force. A group was handpicked by the president to do that process. And that process, it was a promise on the cover letter of transparency, and there was no transparency in that process. That was deemed to be a personnel matter, ergo secret. And some people lived and some people died. Some people left and some people didn't. And nobody ever knew why. That hurt. There's doing hard things, and then there's doing hard things badly. And that's what I call them, the death squads. And I told everybody that's what I call them.
Talking about the like a reduction of faculty, is that what you're talking about?
I think he can probably fill you in on that process more than I can. But that's the two things. Number one, the environment got scary, we centralized, and the faculty staff are alienated because they're no longer part of the decision process. And then number two, process really does matter. You can explain the.
I just want to start off with saying many of the sentiments that are shared here, although they appear negative, they are real. I mean, these are, and although some folks are from larger departments, some departments, especially the smaller ones, really feel these issues because of the positive feedback that Jerry mentioned, because there's so much pressure that, well, now you have to recruit more, but you still have to teach your classes. How do you go out and actually do all the recruitment and stuff, which is important for the university, but for a small department, it's hard for them to do those things. But part of the reason why I joined the board was because, and why I ran for the position, is because I remember what he was talking about very clearly. The death squads, I called it Game of Thrones, and it was in 2014, you know, I don't know the reasons for why the meeting was done the way it was for my time, but rather than the president and provost, you know, being responsible for determining which departments live or die, it was entirely put upon the Board of Regents, which we've already conversed that will never happen again, and that approach. But because of that, although it's now 8 years ago, the memories of that still are alive and well, and that Game of Thrones philosophy, that it does make it harder when, you know, how do we talk to students who are undeclared majors or departments bickering with one another to try to win students over, or do students feel like they're part of a whole university? Do we worry about departments in colleges like battleships shooting at one another, or do we actually come together and say, yes, having a music department, having a history department, whether or not the prior governor of the state thought those were important, are those vital to having a well-rounded student who can learn for life and be a good citizen? And it's hard wrestling with the performance-based funding that says these degrees are more important than those degrees. So the sentiments that are in here are real. And I appreciate Chair Eaves for also hearing me out on some of them. And you know, I can't speak for the chair's positions on things because it's him, but I think it's apparent, though, to me, that he actually cares, and a big part of that is shaped by the agenda. Prior to his arrival on the board, and it's kind of I worked diligently communicating with the president. You know, they don't understand athletics as a part of the budget section. Still, it's a you know, still talking double-digit millions of dollars of actual cash, and then in terms of what they bring in terms of revenue, it might be under $10 million. But it's still a significant sum of money. But the president would, and others would ask, why do the faculty and staff think it's such a big part of the? I said, well, we would always put out, well, these are prerogatives of a board. I'm not, and it was always first on the agenda. We would spend more time as a board on it than any other subject. Some of that's just because boards sometimes when they get started, it's just whatever the first topic is, gets the most time, and then it's like, well, it's gonna be lunch in about, an hour, and we've done spent. So some of that was that, so we've, working with the provost, I think Provost Ziegler has been a more active advocate. She's the first provost that we've had that actually has a long-term view. Prior to her, every provost that we had, since I had been a decade of interim provosts, good people, good human beings, but working year to year, but getting the board agenda in a way that it actually is organized to where the location of just that on the docket is important. And then in regards to understanding more details, Chair Eaves and I both had a shared kind of concern about getting more granular details for the budget, and you've got some that you see in an attachment on that reflects reflects the budget. So if somebody wants to go in and look at how much the $3.5 million increase, you can see it. It's there, but you can also see what the Department of Athletics indicates the different rates in terms of revenue for it. And typically, I've shared the concerns because they have had, in terms of very apparent capital investments, when you can go through some of the halls and stuff like that. Alumni Coliseum was a institutional priority and a community priority for the university in terms of a capital project the state supported. But I know, though, that should the legislature, which I hope that they will, the governor and most of them are speaking about redoing kind of another capital project. We've got the assurance from the president that some of these academic departments that have been working in conditions with elevated humidities, which is causing increased mold and all that, I gather that Rusty Carpenter and a few others are working on a campus kind of plan that will bring some together to have a nice academic complex that will house a lot of them. So this would be what we would ask as the president communicated to the board on questions about buildings, that he would put that as a top priority to the legislature as our top capital project. And I would imagine it's going to be between a $50 and $120 million building, but it would take a couple of years. But this is all long term, so people are still looking for in the short term. And then I appreciate Chair Eaves, actually, him and Vice Chair Long. I learned this from the provost and others, and then from them again. They toured a lot of academic buildings, whereas before, there were members of the board that would tour athletic facilities and student life facilities. But it's important. I had one of our faculty colleagues suggest that we should have a board meeting in the Combs Auditorium. I don't know if it would meet the open meeting requirements, as being a place that's hospitable for guests. But
we got a fresh coat of paint because we're Regents. That's tough sometimes. So.
Yeah, so I'm glad that there's actually sunlight being shined in some of the areas. But the concerns that have been raised, though, are ones that are there. Some of them, again, if one of the institution's core values right now in the strategic plan is trust. And because in order for a university to move forward, we have to have that. And but a big part of it is, it's no secret here, this is why we've got on the board of regents, is the university has to do its best to restore trust and what we as an institution do for the community, what we as a university do for our people, for our students, because the 2014 situation that also included a lot of, it wasn't just what had happened, also how it happened, which then led to litigation and the university having to put forward records, and then the records that were put forward were supposed to have redactions, didn't have redactions, and the whole situation then was a real mess. And a lot of those folks that are here now in 8 or 9 years, those are people who are mid-level or the senior folks that really have the ability to influence the trajectory of the university. But they remember. I mean, they remember like it was yesterday. I mean, people up on a stage, and so we'll never, as as long as I'm around, and we're not gonna do that. The board should be in the business of deciding which programs, stay, and which ones go. But the board does have to do the hard work of working with the state's limited funds. So the chair's support and Vice President Warner's support, the board got its first presentation that showed what the state budget looks like and what it has looked like. But the board was very aware of the decades-long decline in state support. But if we don't talk about it, it doesn't happen. So if we're talking about it, then maybe some of the other board members and stuff, when they're talking to our friends, we don't lobby, but they can educate and say, hey, if we could even just get back to the state support that we had in 2002 or 3, it could improve the quality of life of people. But some of our problems though here are tough. But the management of funds, our other regional universities in the state are also in similar circumstances for the most part, from what I gather. Some of them are in far, far worse.
Or worse.
Are far worse shape. But I appreciate the comments. I'm glad that the chair was able to come today too, to be with us. I've talked too long. He knows I talked too long before meetings.
Jason and Jeremiah, who is Jeremiah Durson, who is, I guess, the staff regent, are one of my earliest meetings was with them privately. And I can promise you, they are great advocates for their constituents.
We're just trying to call balls and strikes. We're not trying to sugarcoat them.
I understand that, and that's the only way I'm going to understand.
I would present one final point for Your Honor. There is physical capital investment, and then there is human capital. Capital investments, as you know, are long-term investments over time. It's ironic that whereas the legislature seems to have forgotten that we're supposed to be making long-term capital investments in the young people and less educated people in the Commonwealth in order to enhance the wealth and success of the Commonwealth. That Eastern and Western were created as a response to human capital investments in 1906. That now it strikes me that our budget's bigger, but our investments tend to be physical capital investments as opposed to human capital. And I just wish Your Honor would look at the balancing of those two categories of investments because they interact.
Well, I understand that fortunately, unfortunately, probably fortunately, the legislature at some point when they send money down here, they don't give us the discretion what to use it for. And had they not allocated the money for that particular purpose, probably wouldn't send it at all. I don't know that I understand that, or it's just the way it is. But I take your point. I did, to Jason's point, on a rainy afternoon, I asked to see the 5 worst maintained buildings on campus. So, Alan Long said he didn't have anything going on, so he tagged along, and we toured the basements and boiler rooms of the worst that you had. And the 19th floor of Commonwealth Hall. I did go look at my old dorm room.
It's not haunted. Isn't there a floor in the Commonwealth that was haunted? Anyway.
Not the one I was on.
Yeah.
I'd like to step in if I could.
Really, yeah, we have 5 minutes left
Please.
officially.
If there's somebody else.
I wanted to make a special shout out to the folks on Zoom to make sure we don't have any questions lingering there or comments.
Yeah, we actually have the space till 5:30 if anybody.
Okay.
Eaves wants to go on.
Karen,
I'll
go
just
ahead.
make one brief comment. I really have appreciated the comments that everyone has made about faculty and finances, but I've also appreciated the comments that people have made about the need for faculty to have a voice and to be respected as experts in their field. that's something that really touches my heart. And I just can relate to when people are talking about morale. And that's something that would be such an easy fix. It wouldn't really cost a dime to treat people a little better. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Rob, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll just say a nice thing here is that every faculty member that I've talked to, we're all dedicated to what we do. We are the people who are connected to students in the work that they're doing every day, and we're good at it. I've been here for 23 years. If I didn't like what I was doing, if I didn't enjoy going into the classroom or working with students outside the classroom, I would have gone bonkers long ago. But I'm still here and I'm still good at it. And I'm going to be here for quite some time to come. So we're doing the work. Faculty and students do what the university does. And we're dedicated to it. And it would be nice to be happier doing it outside that immediate interaction with the students.
Being happy is a good thing.
Can I ask a really quick question? Earlier on, you said one of your priorities was to kind of restore that connection between EKU and the city. And I realize it's real early days, but do you have any ideas on how you're thinking about doing that? Any kind of threads for the approach you'll take?
Well, I wish I could say that I could understand why it's not better. And I don't know that that's possible. It's just never been very good. And I guess again, I've been around a long time, and my initial thought is that Richmond just sees, that Eastern has been independent, the city's been independent, and neither thought they needed the other. Neither thought they could benefit by the other. That's, Eastern's got all the money in the world. They get government money. They get all this stuff, and so they don't. There's no we're just separate. And nobody's ever told me that, but I don't find can't come up with any other rationale for it. But I guess from my point of view, there's some concern from Richmond or some folks on the commission that, well, we don't want to be seen as doing anything to help or benefit Eastern. We don't want to do something that somebody says, well, you're helping them. And I guess from my point of view, a relationship between Eastern and the city benefits the city. They're not, whether it benefits us, they benefit themselves. And I'll just take one quick example. The university did an economic impact analysis, which is very interesting reading and way over my head, but I get I skip right to the bottom line and I get the 2 summary pages. And so the crux of it is having the university here and the business that falls out from that generates huge amounts of money for the city, for the county, and for Central Kentucky. The All-A Classic basketball, I was absolutely shocked to find out there were 41,000 people who attended that. So I've asked, I want an economic impact analysis. Show me how the city benefited by something that Eastern put on. And isn't it in the city's interest to have an event like that every month? If Eastern could have an event that would draw 40,000 people here a month, it's not going to happen, but if it did, that'd be a huge boon to the city. So in my view, everybody, both sides, and I don't say it's all the city, because I don't believe that. I think it's been a mutual problem. Nobody wanted to be the first person to ask. Nobody wanted to be the person to attend the other guy's meeting and all that kind of stuff. So what I do is attend everybody's meeting. I go, when the city meets, I go meet with them. I take everybody to lunch. I do all that kind of stuff and try to convince them that the city does better when Eastern does better and vice versa. And I truly don't believe that we'll ever be everything we can be until we get past this kind of single-minded focus. So I think it's interaction. I think it's going to take some one-on-one contact and conversation. The president is going to make a presentation to the city commission in several weeks to discuss this economic impact analysis and some of those things and the ideas, some ideas that we've kicked around about things that we can do cooperatively. You know, isn't it amazing? County's got to have soccer fields, the city's got to have soccer fields, all the schools have to have soccer fields, and Eastern's got to have soccer fields. Now, really. There are just a lot of things that everybody spends a lot of money on, that if we were all partners, we'd sit down and come up with a way, well, how can we do this for about a third of the expense and everybody still get what they want? And you just need to have those conversations, and they haven't. That hasn't happened. So we'll see what comes of it. I'm a big thinker. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not.
Thanks for the
If
question.
you have any suggestions for how to grease those wheels, I would appreciate it.
That's why I asked.
I would appreciate it.
I think a lot of people see that as a great idea, though. I mean, and there have been efforts made in the past to, like the walkway down to downtown and, try to make those physical connections at least.
Well, and I don't want to be critical of anybody, but I think a lot of times it's just, it comes down to whose responsibility is it to pick up the phone. I expect him, I'm the guy in the big seat, so they need to call me. And I think in years past, I don't think that attitude, at least at Eastern, is not prevalent today, because President McFadden believes, as I do, that a relationship with the city, and to a lesser extent the county, but certainly the city, is a big deal. It's important in the university. It could be a great big deal for the city. Why would you not want to be a partner with the biggest guy in town? It just defies common sense that you and I would want to be. So and we need, I'll share with you my theory. We need a project. One, sidewalks, good. We had that conversation to do that, but we need a project. We need a very visible, doesn't have to be a great big expensive something, but we need a single project that we can do together, and that everybody can look at and say, well, hell, we can do this. I mean, this works. We just need a project.
Sometimes Richmond's compared to Owensboro, and I used to play in the Owensboro Symphony, and they're lucky, they have a river. And so they have this beautiful, we revitalized their river park, this beautiful park by the river.
All great cities have rivers, though. They do.
But, I would think the Performing Arts Center might be an opportunity. I don't know if that space is really utilized to its fullest extent. I mean, that seems like a great place to draw people in.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But, and that's a whole different subject that I've also taken a personal interest in. But to a large extent, that's something that's already here, and that the cities, originally Richmond, Berea, the county and Eastern, that was going to be a jointly operated and managed facility. And just to be candid, the city and the county just really don't have an interest. It's here. I can't speak to why they have the position that they do, but they just don't really. I suspect they think that, well, Eastern's going to operate it. We're going to get the benefit of it anyway. But they just really don't have much of an interest in being involved, and I think that's unfortunate. I think how many cities of any size have that kind of facility? It's just one of a very few shining stars that we have in our community, and it's unfortunate that everybody doesn't get behind it and push it. Old friend of mine said one time, said, if you do what you always done, you get what you always got. And I think there's a tremendous amount of truth to that.
Is that a good note of wisdom to end on?
That's that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. That was a good, earnest conversation.
Well, I appreciate,
Yeah.
I do appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the information. And as always, you know, the difference, being a lawyer, as soon as I came on the board, the first thing I did was call the university council, who I know, and said, look, I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. I'm a lawyer, but I'll try very hard not to be a lawyer when I'm doing this. And the same thing is, I'm not an administrator. I'm not, you know, I may have the clout to do a lot of things that I'm not qualified to do, and don't feel like it's my role to do. There are a lot of things I want to understand, and things that I can, I think, navigate through the board. But my job is not to do the president's job. And he's, I'm sure, far better educated and trained to do it than I would ever be. And at least I'm smart enough to understand it, I think. So, but I do appreciate the information, and I'm always glad to listen, as long as we don't get too deep into the weeds.
Can I go back on my word? We just had the vice chair of faculty senate walk in, and you wanna,
Hi, I'm Lisa Kay. I'm from Math and Statistics. And as Jerry said, I'm currently serving as a Senate Vice Chair, and I just got out of class, but I wanted to
okay.
say hi.
All right, well, we're just wrapping up, but we'll clap again. Just so. All right, thank you for everyone attending on Zoom. I'm going to end the meeting now.
Please help yourself to refreshments.
And yes, please help yourself to refreshments.